Hi, I'm Arthur, and you know what? It's been a minute since I covered the basics of a cardinal faction in 40k. One of the playable ones that at current times have been absorbed into another faction and are basically non-existent. No, we're not talking about the Death Watch today. Hi everyone, I'm Arthur, and on this channel, we do our best to piss off as many people as possible by making half-correct statements about anything and everything without acknowledging why. Like, fun fact, I actually do know it's pronounced Catachan. I just prefer saying Catacan, and also prefer saying it that way because it makes people annoyed. Be happy that it's just that. I almost pronounced Catan as Citan intentionally up to this point. So, yeah, I'll expect my thank you letters in the mail. Nothing makes me happier than intentionally spreading more or less harmless misinformation in a way that would make me laugh just a little bit more than I probably should. So, on the topic of being God's silliest little fool, we are going to talk about the Harlequins, the greatest of the jesters in the 40k setting, and probably the only Eldari faction I tolerate more so than the Drukhari because they're just funny. I do have problems with them, obviously, but it is what it is, so I want to give a general overview of their lore, their history, give an up-to-date account of what they're probably doing right now to my knowledge, and then discuss some other factions so that if you wanted to hop into it, you could probably pick one and go from there. So, remember to drink your gamer subs, eat something tasty, and before we hop into this video, I've got bills to pay, but also I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. Getting back from Adepticon, I have to admit I went a bit too nuts. I never buy large bulks of a singular game, but I always buy multiple different games and a lot of different starter sets for games that I eventually just play until I get burnt out on them. So, yeah, I had quite a lot of games with me this year because the selection this year is fantastic. To give you the short list, Conquest, First Blood, Retro Raygun, Carnivale, Relic Knight, Relic of Blade, and got even significantly deeper into Conflict 47 by buying every single metal totem core I could get my hands on. So when I say I had storage issues when I got back, it's a bit of an understatement. But with the help of the lovely individual at Tabletop Stronghold coming in clutch once again, I was able to store these bad boys and prep them for painting. Pictured in front of you is my miniature case of over maybe 200 different miniatures, a lot of them from the convention, some of them were just stuff that I was storing, ranging in scales from 10mm Argatoria all the way to 38mm Conquest, and I still have some wiggle room too. The XL case is firmly in my game area, and if that's not to say that if I dropped it anything would happen. No, this thing's sturdy. For context, my first case survived my house fire. That's not actually a joke. It actually did for some reason, and it is perfectly intact. So, if you want to get yourself one of these cases and support the channel, be sure to click my link and also use code BONES25 at checkout for 25% off your order, be it cases, terrain, or anything else that the site has. I am low-key probably going to grab myself a third case sometime soon, so expect that to be mentioned in the future if it does, and that's just a testament to how good the cases are. Special thanks to Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video and just being the coolest guy to work with. And let's get back to the clowns. To understand the Harlequins, we kinda gotta go pretty far back and understand the fall of the Eldar. Yeah, this is a topic that everyone and their mom on any 40k channel has discussed at some point to the point of insanity, but do follow me on this. It's because Kagarak was involved and he thought it was funny, therefore it is kind of relevant to the Harlequins. Basically, we know the broad strokes. Having finished the war in heaven to a decent enough victory where the Eldar as a species can rest on their laurels for a few million years, they did so, becoming so unmatched in power that the universe kind of had nothing to contend with them, and that basically made them more or less all-powerful. They were incredibly psychic entities, had weapons that could fight gods, and not to mention they had gods that helped them from time to time, and I'm pretty sure at this point they were actually functionally immortal. This is what led to the slide. A friend of mine from eons past once gave me a good example as to how the Eldar's fall actually kind of worked. Basically, imagine you're a menial individual doing like a basic job, and you are a member of a race of hyper-specialized aliens who don't ever really die and can do literally anything they want with very little oversight. Cool, but not everyone immediately jumps into blood orgies, right? I hope. So what happens is you start off small. Good example, say you want to be a chef. Very simple task. You want to be an accomplished chef chef, and you have the entire universe at your hands. You enjoy the pageantry of cooking, prepping veggies, getting food ready, cleaning, washing, collecting the freshest of ingredients from the most exotic of worlds. Cool. You create dishes that are known throughout your planet, or at least your neck of the woods, as some of the best. But here's where things get weird. Say you do that for about 100 years. Human beings can be chefs for 50, 60, 70 years and still kind of have a little bit of a zest for it. Just look at Markup Pure White. This is the path you have set on. So after about 100 years, you get a little bit stale. You kind of want to up things up a little bit. So you heard through the grapevine that there is a rare species of plant on another planet that when grounded up and dried actually has a flavor so unique that nobody really has ever had it before. So being a chef, you go out, find this ingredient, and then realizing that this is an option, you find rarer and rarer ingredients and experiment with things, drying, moisturizing, crushing in a mortar and pestle to combine with other ingredients, and then getting into the chemical sciences of creating flavor by hand. Another 100 years go by and you get bored again. Now you learn new cooking methods, more exotic ways of getting flavor out of things, certain rabbit holes you go through. Thus you learn how to do the chemical extraction of blood from a rare kind of crab that, when added to a dish, gives it a special blue pigment, but is also incredibly good for the people who consume it, giving them a very energized feeling, which also, fun fact, horseshoe crabs, their blood is blue and is also steroids to antibiotics for some reason. Neat, right? Don't ever say I don't teach you shit. You pull rare ingredients, pull rare items, rare techniques, give it another 800 years of doing new things over and over and over again, and eventually it all gets stale. So now you are at this point where you have no idea what to add, and it becomes more of a performance to you than it is just the actual meal. Cooking is great, but making people remember it is more important. So take all that together, that's about 1,000 years of learning recipes, cooking, and what have you. Now take that for your standard Eldar, who at the time was uncontested and living or dying, then magnify that by 1,000. You go through that cycle of inspiration and excitement, then seeking out more elaborate ways to cook. Eldar, being millions of years old, they set themselves on these paths that lead to them wanting to master a skill, mastering it, and then realizing there are other avenues to add onto it. So eventually, you are turning meals into experiences of consuming live species preserved psychically because it appeals to the performance. And you might think that that's extreme and that no one would ever do that, but fellas, there's a meal out there in our world where you consume a live octopus, and then them shits are smarter than you give credit for. So don't tell me that if you were immortal, you wouldn't get weird after a couple milli, right? So this is how it happened. It didn't matter the field, it didn't matter the level of obsession. You would slide unless you were careful or aware of it. And due to them being a psychic race, this desire for more is what created Slaanesh. The idea of enough is a myth. The obsession with the height of debauchery caused them to seek greater pleasures. Now, with the birth of Slaanesh and the death of like 99% of the Eldar species, you had the Drukhari who wanted to keep up this level of excess, and instead of, finding easier ways to survive, they just decided to go into Kamara and the webway. Then you have craft worlders who became a bit puritanical and live on the craft worlds. You had the Exodites who kind of just vibed with dinosaurs, which, mood. But you had also this other group that were basically the most conservative of the Eldar pre-fall, which, it's not saying much, but yes, the Harlequins were actually quite chaste in how they dealt with the matter of excess. They worshipped one of the Eldar gods, the laughing god Kegorak, and didn't really want to be better at much other than performing for their god and the masses, which in their ways was probably a religious rite. A lot of their performances, albeit seen as a masterclass in entertainment in Eldar society, were used to shame the degenerates that the species had become. Now, they do indulge in their own excesses, being comedians and entertainers, but a lot of their plays were being used to foreshadow and even warn about the coming purple apocalypse that was is going to subsume the whole universe. So before the fall ever happened, I believe most of the Eldar Harlequin probably just fucked off into their little hidey hole in the middle of the webway, continuing to perform for each other and mastering their craft even further, and each getting their own specialism just based off of how they like to perform. We will cover a few of those masks as to what the groups are called in the end, but for now, this is just to give you an idea of what the Harlequins are as a generic sense. They are performers first, second, and last. They are also some of the greatest duelists in the history of the setting, as remember when I said that they would do these plays for the debased society of what Eldar had become, and it would basically just, make fun of them for the freak shit they were on? Yeah, Eldar society didn't take well to being kink-shamed as often as they were, and would often attack the Harlequins in bouts of intense fury. So they had to learn how to defend themselves, and a lot of their teachings held up over time. So the Harlequins, as a distinct and separate faction from Eldar society, was born. And I think that, as far as origin stories go, being the doomsayers who were kinda right, but not really holding it over the heads of others, yeah, it's kinda cool. So let's get into the modern discussion of the Harlequins proper and discuss kind of what they're doing and what their role in the universe is and their unique culture. Harlequin culture, as you could probably guess, is based around a simple idea. The performance, the play, as it were. Their entire life is a dance that cannot end, and that is because Karbonic is the Eldar god of merriment, albeit not so much one of debauchery and pleasure. It has led to a lot of the Harlequins being viewed with a great deal of confusion by those who fight them. Like, their mainstay way of drawing up battle plans for any offensive that they launch is to basically see which play in their arsenal fits this battle the best, and then find one where they're on the winning side, then play out the parts of the winners most of the time. I know sometimes they probably just pick the losers for like a joke, I guess, which sounds about right for them. They are a bit confusing. And a lot of Harlequins tend to take their roles really fucking seriously. So even if they die in their role, they will choose to die if it meant that the performance would go on. In the end, the Harlequins are jesters entertaining a grinning king, which is basically the best way to sum them up in as short a term as possible. They are genuinely just kind of weird like that, since they dipped out of the Eldar apocalypse prior to the fall of Slaanesh. They had some extra time to learn the web way out, which is why, although most other Eldar species use it, the Harlequins kind of hold a particular level of dominion on it. Through practice, or just the sight of their god helping them on their way through it, they tend to do very well in there, and are usually the biggest threat if you ever were to encounter them in there. They have a fondness for that oh-so-amazing prize hidden there, and that is the Black Library, a repository of all knowledge in recorded history. I don't know if it's ever stated how it gets there, but basically my headcanon idea is that the Black Library is this place where whenever something is written down, the second it's written down, it manifests in the Black Library as a copy. So there is a full copy of the Book of Magnus in there, as well as every book in the series of A Court of Thorns and Roses. No matter how many times the Harlequins try to burn that book series to ashes, it just keeps coming back. Yeah, everyone's getting shots today, I'm sorry. Though on that train of thought, the idea that there is theoretically a single Harlequin out there with access to the Black Library who discovered the Warrior Cat series and thinks it's pretty neat brings me a great deal of joy. Karbonic defends this library with a zeal that you don't see elsewhere, and it makes sense, as you can find any tome in this library, and knowledge is power, as the Space Marines would have you believe. The Harlequins, outside of that, tend to just go places and do stuff. It is a bit vague, but they themselves are a bit vague. They show up at a random location and perform or engage in war or do both, with their various masks showing up to perform some kind of esoteric task that, as of right now, most people involved other than them don't really understand. Due to their shadow seers and grand high super mega shadow seers, I guess, being able to see the future better than most, it will make sense. So I guess suck it, Ulfwan. You stay losing. You tried to stop the Night Lords from killing you, and in the end, you just pissed off the Night Lords and convinced them to kill you more. As it were, the Harlequins don't just go around killing people while dressed up like clowns and dancing. They do actually perform for various species, though mostly just the ones they hold a degree of respect for. Like, they are psychic races who can manipulate the emotions of others with just a thought. It's stated that the Harlequins who do perform for basic humans can cause some interesting results, ranging from tears of joy to wails of insanity, as people just can't understand how to laugh at the funny clowns and they just have to overanalyze everything. I also think it's funny that there was an attempt made at some point theoretically to entertain orcs and they just did not care. It is a great honor, as the many Harlequin troops out there have access to damn near every play in history, and will play all of them for every race to see. This kind of leads them to being an Eldar equivalent of like a remembrancer class, something that you'd find in the Great Crusade, being able to remember and through oral tradition pass on the history of the Eldar race. But there is one tale they will never share with any race outside of their own, simply referred to as the dance. It is the tale of how the Eldar fell to Slaanesh. It is considered the most personal and most important of their plays, and it is only to be performed in private with members of their own species. The craft worlds weep at the memory of what once was and how horrible things got. The Exodites take pride in the simpler lifestyle that they are going through now. Even the Drukhari, who canonically hate remembering the fall and hate damn near anything involving not torturing people, do feel a bit of nostalgic melancholy over the performance of the dance. But this is kind of where we have to discuss a bit of the weirder cultural things that they have. I know this entire section has been about the culture, but I mentioned it before that troops of Harlequins often have specialized roles to play. Some shift their roles from time to time, some are static. It just depends on what plays they're most well known for. The actors embody their roles depending on their masks and also depending on what is needed. So each one is incredibly important for their part, but none are more important, especially to that of the performance of the dance, than that of the Solitaire. Because, well, you can't have a play about Slaanesh without Slaanesh. Solitaires are probably, we don't know, selected by Kagarak, and they are actors who play the part of Slaanesh. But as I've been mentioning this entire time, Harlequins take their roles very seriously. Thus, Solitaires actually do have some kind of link, tenuous or other, with the Dark Prince. Usually it's implied that when they die, their souls do go to Slaanesh, but this gives them a level of power that as of yet most people don't understand outside of the Harlequins. Hell, Harlequin fans don't even really have a consensus, because sometimes the Solitaires in their discussions are on par with the Primarch, and sometimes the Solitaire is just a really, really powerful Harlequin. No one can really agree. I think it's more they have Primarch level agility and weapons as well as gear and an incredibly strong psychic power, but it's still an Eldar, so if you shoot them in the head, they die pretty much quickly. Though there is the fan theory that they are also kind of like Kagarakian demons of a sort. Like, basically they are a physical extension of Kagarak the Laughing God, because Slaanesh thinks they are just an Eldar, so when they die, the grinning mask slowly comes into frame to stab Slaanesh when they try and claim that spirit with a funny Chris dagger or something. But I digress. There are numerous different and interesting ranks of the Harlequins that, although are important, they aren't really as important as the Solitaire, nor as feared. Well, you do have the Death Jester, which is awesome. They're terrifying, but one of my favorite models in the game. A Harlequin with probably the bleakest sense of humor is usually appointed as a Death Jester, and when I say their sense of humor is bleak, I mean very fucking bleak. I'm talking like kill your entire platoon, leaving you alive only to wake up standing in front of you and whisper, "They'll never believe you," then disappearing into the mists. It's only then that you realize that they somehow found a way to replace both your arms and your legs with matching arms from members of your platoon perfectly. Like, there's no sutures or anything, and they work perfectly, and you're just confused for the rest of your life. They think that shit's funny as hell. Oh, and also they have a Shrieker cannon, which is best described as a gun that kills you. I mean, if you get nicked by this, not even hurt or killed. The chemicals that coat it, okay, they usually just end up killing you in as violent a way as humanly possible, but there's a whole wacky mess of things that can happen, ranging from making you shit your pants immediately all the way to you exploding into gory chunks. Depends on the mood of the jester that day, really. Then you have the Shadow Seers, who are incredibly important. They tie into the next major segment of this video as we wrap up, and that's basically just how the Harlequins fight in the various different masks. In short, the Shadow Seers have been described as being able to see the next few pages of the script in regards to the future. They are the Farseers of the Harlequins, but are also kind of massive dicks that when they fight, it's just not fun at all. Like, you could fight an orc and have a great time just because it's just a normal fight, they're just stronger than you. But fighting a Shadow Seer is like trying to grab smoke. They use hallucination, gas grenades, illusions, psychic abilities to make you see shit that's not there. And then eventually, just good old turning invisible to nothing personnel kid you from behind with some kind of evil knife that turns your insides into soup. Having a blank mask and never removing said mask, outside of, Harlequins seeing their face, the design is pretty solid. So let's get into the soup weapon that I was referring to and just kind of discuss their weapons now before going into the masks and wrapping this whole thing up, shall we? The war gear and kit of the Harlequins is kind of crazy. I know there is a lot of memes out there about the Harlequins kiss, but for those who don't know, the Harlequins really do likes them the punching daggers quite a lot. And the most extreme version of that is kind of in the same vein of the weapon that, like, the warp spiders use. I believe it's called the Death Spinner, where that weapon shoots out a cloud of monomolecular edged wire so thin and so light that it actually floats in the air and just looks like a gray cloud from a distance. And if you try to jog through it, it's kind of like running through razor wire. Well, kind of. It doesn't really tangle you up, more just shreds you into pieces so you look more like a pile of mush. But yeah, so the Harlequins kiss kind of operates on a similar level of logic, except the wires, to my knowledge, are just a little bit thicker, not by much, and are housed inside of this kind of punch dagger apparatus mounted on the wrist. It connects with you, the hole punches through you, and then it just blasts your insides with razor wire, basically liquefying everything from your brain to your toes on the inside and pulling it back before any blood manages to stick on it. You just kind of slump to the ground as like a bag of goop. It's kind of a bloodless death, but definitely disturbing. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the Harlequin's Embrace, which is the same idea, but instead of going inside of you, it wraps around you and then shreds you into gory chunks, which I'd assume is used by Harlequin masks that probably have a lot of red outfits at base, because getting the stains out would be murder. In a weird way, these clowns are kind of shock troops. They perform in ways that demoralize, terrify, and humiliate their foes. So all their tactics, all their weapons, and all their war gear is based around that. The Harlequin's Caress is a super unwieldy weapon only used by the Solitaire, and it basically just ignores armor, or anything really. Kind of like the canoptic wraiths that Necron use. They have this ability to phase through things and kind of selectively rephase back into reality at will, so that they can repair cabling in Necron tomb worlds, or cut you in half by ignoring your armor. The Harlequin's Caress can be used to go through a Space Marine's helmet and give their brain a nice massage. They have hallucinogenic grenades, psychic amplifiers that act similar to the death masks of the Sanguinary Guard, where just being near a Harlequin makes you nervous. This, all paired with their grace and constant motion, makes most normal human beings horrified of them. But I can't help but feel some of you freaks out there would be aroused. You disgust me. To end this video off, I'm going to cover a few of the masks, just some ones I thought were either incredibly important or the ones that I think are the coolest and you should give a look into because they're just weird and fun. So starting off, let's probably go with one of the most popular ones, and that is the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow. Remember how I mentioned that the most important of all the performances of the Harlequin is one simply referred to as the dance? Well, the Harlequins of the Midnight Sorrow, much like every 25-year-old dude who got an English degree in college, develops an obsession with Blood Meridian. The Mask of the Midnight Sorrow is obsessed with the dance, embodying the performance so much that many many of their members forget who they once were, favoring simply being seen as the role they play. This constant repetition of the same performance has kind of driven them to a form of insanity. See, revisiting traumatic instances can be good to give you perspective and also, exposure therapy. It works. Forcing yourself to relive it over and over again is akin to the man who survived a car crash only to listen to the voice of his dead wife on loop every night through the voicemail she left him before she, died in that accident. It is not healthy nor productive, and also you should really move on, dude. It wasn't your fault. Either way, when not performing, this mask goes through the webway to rip up some chaotic ass, specifically because they hate. They often fight close to the Eye of Terror and work to kill any and every chaotic force they find, which is kind of horrifying to think about, especially if you only just turned renegade and accepted chaos into your heart. Gotta admit, it's a little bit intimidating to be taking a nap as a space marine, your 2-hour allotment, and then suddenly hearing chuckling in the dark of your room as suddenly thousands of evil clowns show up to the tune of what I would assume is Bone Trussel from Undertale. Next up, one that I personally like because Necron, are the Mask of the Dreaming Shadow. These guys' whole shtick is pretty simple to understand. Now, remember the Fall of the Eldar? Yeah, forget that. Remember, millions of years prior? Yeah, the beef they had with the Necron? Yeah, that's what this mask is all about. The Mask of the Dreaming Shadow are there to kind of keep the Necron tomb worlds silent, asleep, and keep them from waking up and killing anybody who would disturb their slumber. They are noted as being a bit bummed out that they can't fight Slanesh like every other mask is kind of working towards, but it is actually stated in part that their whole being bummed thing is actually part of their performance. It's also noted that a lot of other masks are very thankful for them keeping those fuck-ass robots asleep because it would be annoying to have to fight a battle on two fronts. The last one I wanted to talk about is the Mask of the Soaring Spite. I gotta admit, I am just adding these guys because they include one of my favorite Eldari craft worlds in their lore, and that is the one of Sam Hain. I know it's not pronounced like that, but that's where the name originates from, shut up. And also because these are literally just the speed walk clowns. They like jets, they like void weavers, and boy howdy do they like going goddamn fast. They also apparently do what is essentially Cirque du Soleil on motorcycles for the Dark Eldar, which is probably a smash hit, I'd assume. That is kind of the shit I like about these weirdos. I love the idea of the Harlequins, that while everybody else in the universe is so focused on survival and power, these guys, albeit not discontinuing the idea of fighting to stay alive, focus on entertainment, on oration, on spreading the tales that make their culture important. Kegarak is an unknowable god of confusion, and I have this fan theory that he might also just be the deceiver, and things are going to get really weird in the future, but whatever. He is probably laughing his ass off most of the time due to how funny the whole setting has become at this point, and to be fair, he fucking deserves it. The Harlequins are God's greatest jesters, and I honestly hope they get more models as they recently, 10th editionally, were absorbed into the Eldari Codex, which I feel is a bit annoying because I felt like they were diverse and different enough that they deserve their own, but I doubt they're ever going to get squatted like a lot of people are worried about, but if I may be so bold, I don't think things will ever really get squatted the way they were in the past again. The backlash that GW would get would probably be a bit too intense. Sure, they may trim old models from the site, but I think removing entire armies is a relic of a bygone era. I mean, unless your name isn't the Beastman because GW as a company just has a hate boner for them for some reason. I mean, I'll consider an army being potentially squatted in the future if Beastmen get added to 40k, but they did get removed from AOS and we lost actual models from that, so that's kind of fun. Either way, what do you all think about the Harlequins? Want me to cover the masks that they have in the future? Want me to cover their culture or cover other weirder Xenos that I think about a lot? Let me know in the comments, as well as to remember and like and subscribe, as it helps the channel out, helps me, and lets me know you guys like these videos. Special thanks to my channel members. With your help, I am able to feed my editors, feed myself, and afford to do this as a living. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. It means the world, and more content to come. Thanks once again for watching. And until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.